The lecture hall buzzed with the excited chatter of dozens of alien species, their varied forms creating a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes throughout the tiered seating. ZYXera adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus and glanced at her datapad, noting the subject for today's Galactic History seminar: prohibited species and conflict restrictions. Her 6 eyes sparkled with curiosity as Professor Velthak, a towering Mantarian with 4 arms, entered the chamber. "Settle down, students," Professor Velthak's voice resonated through his translator unit. "Today we discuss one of the most controversial decisions in Galactic Council history: the complete prohibition of human involvement in any form of organized conflict." A ripple of murmurs spread through the classroom. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, but most students had only encountered them in peaceful settings as traders, diplomats, or researchers. The idea that an entire species could be banned from warfare seemed bizarre. Kethare, a Serpentine Ophidian student, raised her scaled hand. "Professor, why would the council ban humans? They seem so ordinary. Small, physically weak, short-lived. What could they possibly do in warfare that would warrant such extreme measures?" Professor Velthak's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. "An excellent question, Kethare. The official records state that humans were banned due to excessive tactical unpredictability and dangerous innovation in conflict scenarios. However, the classified details remain sealed for another 2 centuries. ZYXera leaned forward, her crystalline form refracting the classroom's bioluminescent lighting. "But, Professor, surely there are witness accounts? The ban was implemented only 300 years ago. Many species represented in the council have lifespans that would overlap with those events." "Indeed," the professor nodded. "But those who witnessed human warfare firsthand rarely speak of it. When pressed, they typically change the subject or claim their memories are too disturbing to recall. This has only fueled more speculation about what really happened." The massive form of Thorak, a stone-bodied Petrosan, shifted in his reinforced seat. His species was renowned for their military prowess and unshakable courage in battle. "With respect, Professor, this sounds like exaggeration. My people have fought the crystal wasps of Nexera and the plasma storms of the Void Raiders. What could one small species possibly do that we haven't seen?" Professor Velthak's 4 arms gestured toward the massive holographic display at the front of the classroom. Images of various galactic conflicts appeared: standardized battle formations, predictable siege patterns, conventional weapon exchanges between clearly defined military units. "Your species, Thorak, like most others in the galaxy, fights with honor. You have rules of engagement, codes of conduct, predictable tactical doctrines. Warfare among galactic species has, for millions of years, followed established patterns. Even our most aggressive species, the Vortani warclans, the Razor Fleet of Kalfur, all fight according to understood principles." The display shifted to show a simple star map highlighting the location of Earth and several nearby systems. Humans appeared to follow these same principles when they first made contact with galactic civilization. Their initial military assessments suggested they were capable but unremarkable. Standard bipedal mammalian species with basic technology and conventional military thinking. Lisa, a delicate moth-like Aryan, fluttered her iridescent wings nervously. "So what changed? What made them different?" "That," Professor Velthak said gravely, "is exactly what we're here to investigate. Your assignment for this semester is to research this mystery. You'll work in teams to uncover whatever information you can about human military capabilities and the true reason for their ban. Use the archives, conduct interviews with any beings old enough to remember, analyze trade records, diplomatic communications, anything that might shed light on this puzzle." ZYXera immediately turned to her fellow students. "I propose we work together on this. Thorak's military knowledge, Kethare's analytical skills, Lisa's research abilities, and my access to crystalline data networks, we could cover more ground as a team." The others nodded agreement. Despite their vastly different species backgrounds, they shared the same burning curiosity about this galactic mystery. "Excellent," Professor Velthak continued. "But, I must warn you, this research may uncover disturbing truths. The galaxy has maintained peace and stability for centuries under current military protocols. Some knowledge is restricted not out of censorship, but out of genuine concern for galactic welfare." As the class session ended, the 4 students gathered around ZYXera's workstation. Her crystalline structure allowed her to interface directly with the university's vast data networks, making her an invaluable research partner. Let's start with the basics, Kethare suggested, her forked tongue flicking out as she considered their approach. What do we actually know about humans in contemporary times? Lisa consulted her personal datapad, her compound eyes scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. They're currently classified as a restricted diplomatic species. They maintain trade relationships with most galactic civilizations, but they're prohibited from joining any military alliances, selling weapons technology, or providing tactical consultation. They're also banned from attending any war colleges or military academies, Thorak added. Which seems excessive if they're just another peaceful species. ZYXera's form pulsed with soft light as she accessed the university's historical archives. Here's something interesting. Humans have never requested to have the ban lifted. In fact, according to diplomatic records, human representatives have actively supported maintaining their military restrictions. The group exchanged puzzled looks. What species would voluntarily accept being treated as too dangerous for military involvement? Let's start by interviewing Professor Velthak privately, Kethare suggested. He clearly knows more than he's sharing in class. Professors often reveal additional information when approached individually by serious students. They scheduled a meeting for the following day. That evening, each student conducted preliminary research using their species' unique capabilities and networks. ZYXera dove deep into the crystalline data cores, seeking any archived information about human military encounters. Most files were heavily redacted or classified, but she found fragments of communication logs and battle reports that hinted at something unprecedented. Thorak reached out to military contacts within his clan structure. The Petrosan military maintained detailed records of every significant galactic conflict, and their warrior culture meant combat stories were passed down through generations. Kethare used her species' analytical abilities to examine statistical patterns in galactic military policies. The Ophidians were renowned for their logical thinking and ability to spot inconsistencies in large datasets. Lisa accessed the vast atmospheric data networks that her people used for navigation. The Arians had a unique perspective on galactic events because they traveled extensively and often witnessed events from neutral positions. When they reconvened the next morning, each brought disturbing fragments of information. I found references to something called asymmetric escalation, ZYXera reported. The term appears in heavily classified council records, but always in connection with human military encounters. Thorak's stone features looked troubled. My clan elders refused to discuss specific battles, but one mentioned that fighting humans changed the nature of warfare itself. He wouldn't elaborate, but he seemed afraid. The statistical patterns are bizarre, Kethare added. Every major galactic conflict involving humans ended either in complete human victory or immediate cessation of hostilities. There are no records of prolonged campaigns, standard sieges, or conventional defeats. Lisa's wings trembled slightly. My people's atmospheric readings from human conflict zones show massive environmental disruptions. But not from conventional weapons. The patterns suggest something entirely different from normal warfare. Professor Velthak agreed to meet them in his private office that afternoon. The space was cramped with artifacts from dozens of different civilizations, but notably absent were any items from Earth or human space. I see you've begun your research, the professor observed. And I suspect you're finding more questions than answers. Professor, ZYXera said directly, we need to understand what really happened. The official records are incomplete, and everyone who witnessed human warfare acts as though they've seen something traumatic. Professor Velthak was silent for a long moment, his forearms folding in complex patterns that suggested deep contemplation among his species. Very well, he said finally. I'll share what I can, but you must understand that this information comes with responsibility. What I'm about to tell you has been kept from general circulation for good reason. He activated a privacy shield around his office, ensuring their conversation couldn't be monitored or recorded. 300 years ago, humans were involved in what the official records call the Kethvar system incident. A minor territorial dispute between the Zeralian Empire and the Novak Confederation. Both sides hired human military consultants, thinking they were engaging standard mercenary forces. The professor's voice grew quieter. The conflict was supposed to last months, possibly years. Standard siege warfare, conventional space battles, predetermined outcomes based on resources and technology. Instead, it ended in 18 days. 18 days? Thorak repeated. For a system-wide conflict? That's impossible. The humans didn't fight the war that was planned, Professor Velthak continued. They fought an entirely different war. One that neither side was prepared for, understood, or could counter. The students leaned forward, captivated despite their growing unease. The Zeralians found their supply lines completely severed within hours. Not destroyed, severed. The humans had somehow convinced the Zeralian supply crews to defect, turned their own logistics network against them. Psychological warfare? Kethare suggested. Beyond anything previously seen. But that was just the beginning. The Novak Confederation discovered that their secure communications had been compromised for weeks. Not hacked, the humans had convinced Novak communication officers to voluntarily provide access codes. Lisa's compound eyes widened. How could they manage such massive infiltration so quickly? That's when the council realized they were dealing with something unprecedented. Humans didn't just fight battles, they fought entire wars in ways no other species had ever conceived. They attacked supply chains, morale, command structure, civilian populations, economic systems, political foundations, everything simultaneously. Professor Velthak stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the peaceful campus where dozens of species coexisted harmoniously. The final straw came when both the Zeralian and Novak leadership realized that continuing the conflict would result in the complete collapse of their civilizations. Not military defeat, total societal breakdown. The humans had somehow engineered scenarios where traditional victory became meaningless. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The council emergency session that followed was the largest in galactic history, the professor continued. For the first time, nearly every spacefaring civilization agreed on something: humans could never again be allowed to participate in organized conflict. But why? ZYXera asked. If they're so effective, wouldn't they be valuable allies? Professor Velthak turned back to face them, his expression grave. Because, my dear student, the humans didn't just win the Kethvar system incident. They revealed that every other species in the galaxy had been playing a children's game and calling it warfare. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but the students now understood they were investigating something far more significant than a simple military restriction. They were uncovering evidence that humans represented a fundamental challenge to the established order of galactic civilization. As they left the professor's office, each student carried a growing sense that their research might reveal truths that could change their understanding of not just humans, but the entire nature of conflict itself. The university's archives stretched deep underground, carved into the bedrock of the planet itself. ZYXera led her team through the crystalline corridors, her natural luminescence providing guidance through sections where the artificial lighting had grown dim with age. They had spent weeks pursuing leads from Professor Velthak's revelations, and each discovery had only deepened the mystery. Here, ZYXera announced, stopping before a massive vault door marked with symbols from dozens of different civilizations. These are the sealed military archives. Officially, we shouldn't have access, but my crystalline interface can sometimes bypass older security protocols. Thorak positioned himself near the entrance, his massive frame serving as both lookout and deterrent to casual interruption. The Petrosan military archives mention something called Project Looking Glass. A joint intelligence operation from just after the human ban was implemented. Kethare coiled herself around a nearby data terminal, her serpentine form allowing her to access multiple input devices simultaneously. I've been analyzing the aftermath statistics. In the 3 centuries since humans were banned from warfare, galactic military casualties have actually increased by 40%. That doesn't make sense, Lisa observed, her delicate wings fluttering with agitation. If humans were so dangerous in conflict, removing them should have made warfare safer. ZYXera's form pulsed with concentration as she interfaced with the vault's security system. Unless the problem wasn't that humans were too violent, but that they were too effective at ending conflicts quickly. The massive door cycled open with a deep rumble, revealing chambers filled with data crystals, memory banks, and storage devices from civilizations spanning millions of years of galactic history. The air carried the metallic scent of preservative fields and the ozone smell of active data streams. Project Looking Glass should be in Section Gamma 7, Thorak directed, consulting a Petrosan military reference guide. My clan maintains cross-references to most major galactic intelligence operations. They moved deeper into the archives, past rows of sealed containers holding the military secrets of dozens of civilizations. Finally, they located a cluster of storage units marked with Council Authority seals and temporal restriction codes. ZYX era approached the primary storage unit, her crystalline structure interfacing directly with the containment field. These files are heavily encrypted, but the encryption is 300 years old. My people's data processing capabilities have advanced significantly since then. As the storage unit opened, holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber. Battle maps, communication logs, personnel files, and strategic analyses filled the air around them like a constellation of information. Look at this, Kethra called from her position near a tactical display. These are battle plans from the HFY system incident. Both sides developed comprehensive strategies for a prolonged conflict. The holographic maps showed detailed siege positions, supply route calculations, reinforcement schedules, and casualty projections. Everything suggested a standard military engagement that should have lasted months. Now look at what actually happened, Lisa added, manipulating another display with her delicate appendages. The second set of maps was barely recognizable. Supply lines had been completely rerouted, command structures had collapsed, civilian populations had been evacuated or relocated, and entire military units had simply disappeared from their assigned positions. How did the humans accomplish this? Thorak wondered aloud. The timeline shows massive systemic changes happening within hours of human arrival. ZYX era accessed a communication log archive, her form brightening as data flowed through her consciousness. Here's something. Intercepted communications between human military units during the first day of conflict. A holographic figure materialized, a human female in what appeared to be standard military attire. Her voice, translated through multiple linguistic filters, carried an odd mix of casualness and precision. Alpha Team, this is Command. Remember, we're not here to win a war. We're here to make war impossible. Target priorities remain logistics, communications, morale, and economic stability. Avoid direct engagement unless absolutely necessary. Another voice responded, Command, this is Beta Team. We've made contact with Zeralian supply crews. Psychological profiles indicate strong family loyalty, suggesting we focus on evacuation protocols for civilian populations rather than supply interdiction. Confirmed, Beta Team. Charlie Team reports similar success with Novak communication personnel. Apparently, their religious beliefs emphasize protecting non-combatants. We're leveraging that through cultural liaison protocols. The students exchanged bewildered looks. This didn't sound like any military communication they had ever heard. Where were the battle plans, the weapon deployments, the tactical maneuvers? Kethra accessed another set of files, her analytical mind working to piece together patterns in the data. Here's a psychological evaluation of human military personnel, conducted by Council Intelligence after the incident. The report was extensive, but several sections stood out immediately. Human military thinking appears to operate on fundamentally different assumptions than other galactic species. Where most civilizations view warfare as an extension of politics by other means, humans appear to view warfare as a systemic failure that must be corrected through comprehensive intervention. Most concerning is their apparent inability to conceive of limited conflict. Human military doctrine assumes that any engagement of military force indicates a breakdown in social systems that requires total restructuring to prevent recurrence. Council analysts are troubled by human military personnel's consistent focus on root cause elimination rather than tactical victory. They appear genuinely confused by the concept of fighting a war without simultaneously restructuring the economic, political, and social systems that made the war possible. Thorak's stone features shifted into what passed for confusion among his people. They were trying to solve the reasons for the war while fighting it? More than that, Lisa realized, accessing additional files. Look at these post-conflict analyses. The humans didn't just stop the HFY system war, they restructured both civilizations so that similar conflicts would be nearly impossible in the future. The evidence was overwhelming. The Zeralian Empire and Novak Confederation had emerged from the 18-day conflict with completely transformed economic systems, new political structures, and cultural changes that emphasized cooperation over competition. How could 18 days of military action cause such massive social transformation? ZYX era wondered. The answer came from an unlikely source, a personal journal entry from a Zeralian civilian who had lived through the conflict. The humans didn't conquer us, the journal read. They convinced us to conquer ourselves. Somehow, they made us see that our entire way of life was built on systems that inevitably led to conflict. They didn't force us to change, they made us want to change. Another entry, from a Novak Confederation official, provided additional insight. Our government tried to resist human influence, but our own citizens began demanding the reforms the humans suggested. Not because the humans threatened us, but because the reforms simply made sense. It was like someone had pointed out that we had been walking backwards our entire lives. Kethare's serpentine form coiled tighter as she processed the implications. They conducted psychological warfare on an entire civilization level. They convinced both sides that their fundamental social structures were flawed. But how? Thorak demanded. What kind of technology or capability allows such massive influence? The answer came from an unexpected source, a classified report from the Council's own investigation team. Human military capabilities appear to be based on unprecedented pattern recognition and systems analysis. They can identify the underlying causes of conflict within hours of arrival and design interventions that address root causes rather than symptoms. More disturbing is their apparent ability to communicate these insights in ways that different species find compelling. They seem to understand how each civilization's psychology works and can present information in culturally appropriate formats that bypass normal resistance to change. Most troubling of all, human military personnel demonstrate genuine emotional distress when forced to use traditional combat methods. They appear to view violence as a failure of problem-solving rather than a tool of policy. Lisa's compound eyes reflected the holographic displays as understanding dawned. They're not better warriors than other species. They're better at making warfare unnecessary. The team spent hours reviewing additional files, each revelation more startling than the last. Humans had been involved in dozens of conflicts before the ban, and, in every case, the pattern was the same: rapid resolution through systemic intervention rather than military victory. A tactical analysis from the Vortani war clans was particularly revealing. Human military consultants were hired to help us defeat the Crystal Swarm invasion. Instead, they spent 3 days analyzing our social structure and discovered that our warrior culture was actually making us vulnerable to swarm tactics. They convinced our leadership to temporarily adopt collaborative decision-making protocols. The invasion collapsed within a week because the swarms couldn't adapt to our suddenly cooperative response patterns. The humans then spent another month helping us design permanent cultural modifications that maintained our warrior identity while eliminating the systematic vulnerabilities that had made the invasion possible. Thorak stood motionless for several minutes, processing what he had learned. As a member of a warrior culture himself, the implications were staggering. They didn't just defeat the enemy. They made the enemy's tactics obsolete. Another file contained a communication between council members during the emergency session that had led to the human ban. The question before us is not whether humans are dangerous in warfare, one council member had argued. The question is whether our entire conception of conflict and military power has become obsolete. If we allow human military involvement to continue, another had responded, within decades every civilization in the galaxy will have been restructured according to human principles of conflict resolution. The diversity of political and social systems that has characterized galactic civilization for millions of years will cease to exist. Not through conquest, a third voice had added, but through voluntary adoption of more effective systems. Our citizens will choose human methods because they simply work better. ZYX Sarah's crystalline form dimmed as she processed the enormity of what they were discovering. The council didn't ban humans because they were too violent. They banned them because they were too good at creating peace. The team spent the rest of the day reviewing files, each revelation building a picture of human military capabilities that was unlike anything they had expected. Humans didn't fight wars, they solved the problems that caused wars. And they were so effective at it that the galactic community had decided such capabilities were too dangerous to allow. As evening approached and they prepared to leave the archives, Kethare posed the question that had been growing in all their minds: if humans are this effective at ending conflicts, why did they agree to the ban? Why didn't they resist? The answer would come later, but already they suspected it would reveal something even more disturbing about human nature than anything they had discovered so far. The human embassy district occupied a modest section of the capital world's diplomatic quarter, its buildings designed in the understated style that characterized human architecture throughout the galaxy. Unlike the towering spires of the Mantarian delegation or the crystalline complexes of ZYX Sarah's people, the human structures seemed almost deliberately unremarkable. After discovering the truth about human military capabilities in the archives, the student team had requested a formal interview with human representatives. To their surprise, the embassy had immediately agreed, suggesting they speak with Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human liaison for academic research. I must admit, we've been wondering when someone would ask the right questions, Dr. Vasquez said as she welcomed them into a conference room decorated with images from Earth, landscapes, wildlife, and cities that seemed both familiar and alien to the student visitors. Dr. Vasquez appeared typical of her species, bipedal, mammalian, with the short lifespan and relatively fragile physiology that characterized humans. But, after weeks of research, the students now viewed these apparent limitations with new understanding. Dr. Vasquez, ZYX-era began carefully, we've been researching the military restrictions placed on your species 300 years ago. We've discovered that the official reasons don't match the actual circumstances. The human woman nodded, her expression mixing sadness with what looked like relief. You found out about the HFY system incident and the others. You learned that we weren't banned for being too violent, but for being too effective at ending violence. Why didn't your people resist the ban? HFY asked directly. Our research suggests you could have easily prevented the council from implementing such restrictions. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment, gazing out the window at the diverse array of beings moving through the diplomatic district. Because we agreed with it. In fact, we requested it. The silence that followed was profound. Thorak's stone features shifted into deep confusion, while Lisa's wings trembled with agitation. You requested to be banned from military involvement? Thorak rumbled. But, your capabilities could have brought peace to the galaxy. That's exactly the problem, Dr. Vasquez replied. Let me explain something about human psychology that your research probably didn't reveal. We don't just solve conflicts, we can't help but solve them. When humans encounter systemic problems, we become compulsively driven to fix them. She stood and moved to a wall display, activating images of various galactic civilizations. Every species you've encountered has evolved to exist within their particular social and political systems. Your people, Thorak, are warriors by nature. Catharay's species are analytical and logical. ZYX-Sera's people are natural connectors and communicators. Lisa's species are explorers and observers. Humans, she continued, evolved to be problem solvers. But not just any problems, systemic problems. Social structures that don't work, governments that fail their citizens, economic systems that create inequality, cultures that generate conflict. We can't observe these problems without feeling compelled to fix them. She brought up a new display showing psychological profiles of human military personnel from the prohibited conflicts. Look at these assessments. Every single human involved in galactic warfare reported severe emotional distress, not from the violence, but from being forced to observe suffering that could be prevented. The profiles revealed a pattern that was disturbing in its implications. Human soldiers, tacticians, and consultants consistently described feeling physically ill when witnessing what they termed systemically perpetuated conflict. One of our military advisors wrote in his personal journal, Dr. Vasquez continued, reading from a display document, it's like watching people choose to starve while standing in a field full of food. The solutions are obvious, but I'm being asked to help them fight over the scraps instead of teaching them to farm. Catharay's analytical mind worked to process these revelations. So when humans engage in warfare, they don't see military objectives. They see systemic problems that need comprehensive solutions. Exactly. And here's what made the council so afraid: we're really good at convincing other species to see problems the same way we do. Dr. Vasquez activated another display showing the post-conflict analysis from Cathvar system. We didn't conquer the Zeralians and Novaks. We spent 18 days explaining to them why their social structures inevitably led to conflict, and helping them design better alternatives. But that's a good thing, Lisa protested. Peace is better than war. Is it? Dr. Vasquez asked quietly. What if peace comes at the cost of everything that makes different civilizations unique? The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The council realized that if humans continued to solve galactic conflicts, within a few generations every civilization would have adopted human-designed social systems. Not because we conquered them, but because our systems simply work better at preventing conflict. She displayed a projection showing potential galactic development with continued human involvement in military affairs. The model was shocking. Within 2 centuries, every major civilization would have converged on nearly identical social, economic, and political structures. Cultural homogenization on a galactic scale, Thorak whispered. The end of diversity among thinking species. We call it the optimization problem, Dr. Vasquez explained. Humans are naturally drawn to optimizing systems for maximum efficiency and minimum suffering. But optimization often requires eliminating variation. What makes sense to us as fixing broken systems looks to others like cultural imperialism. ZYXera's crystalline form pulsed with troubled light. But, if your methods prevent suffering and create peace, how can they be wrong? That's the question that kept our philosophers awake for decades, Dr. Vasquez replied. Is it ethical to eliminate suffering if it means eliminating the diversity of ways that conscious beings can exist? She brought up files from internal human government discussions during the period of the Council's deliberations. Our own analysis suggested that allowing humans to continue military involvement would result in what we termed beneficial cultural genocide. Not the destruction of other species, but the gradual replacement of their unique ways of organizing society with more efficient human-designed alternatives. The students reviewed the human government's internal debates, finding discussions that were both disturbing and admirable. Human leaders had wrestled with the realization that their desire to help others was fundamentally transforming galactic civilization. In the end, Dr. Vasquez continued, we concluded that the diversity of approaches to existence among galactic civilizations was more valuable than the prevention of conflict through optimization. She displayed the formal human response to the Council's proposed military restrictions. Instead of protesting the ban, Earth's government had submitted a detailed proposal for implementing it, along with voluntary additional restrictions on human cultural influence. We agreed to limit ourselves to trade, research, and diplomatic relationships. We committed to avoiding involvement in the internal affairs of other civilizations, even when we could see obvious improvements that could be made. But that must be incredibly difficult, Lisa observed. If you can see solutions to problems that cause suffering, how do you resist implementing them? Dr. Vasquez's expression became pained. It is. Every human who works in galactic affairs undergoes extensive psychological conditioning to suppress our natural problem-solving instincts when they involve other species' social systems. She showed them videos of human diplomats and traders working throughout the galaxy, their interactions carefully limited to specific, non-interventionist roles. We've learned to confine our optimization impulses to human space and to collaborative projects where other species specifically request our involvement. But it's a constant struggle. The students began to understand the true nature of the human restriction. It wasn't a punishment imposed by the Council, it was a voluntary quarantine that humans had accepted to preserve galactic diversity. The hardest part, Dr. Vasquez continued, is knowing that conflicts we could easily resolve continue to cause suffering throughout the galaxy. Our military analysts estimate that over 2 million beings have died in preventable conflicts since our ban was implemented. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. 2 million deaths that could have been prevented, but weren't, in order to preserve the right of civilizations to maintain their own flawed systems. Why are you telling us this? Cathare asked suddenly. This information could destabilize galactic political structures if it became widely known. Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. Because you're students. You represent the next generation of galactic leadership. You deserve to understand the true costs and benefits of the choices your predecessors made. She stood and moved to another display showing current galactic affairs, ongoing conflicts, political tensions, trade disputes, and social problems. The question for your generation is whether the current arrangement should continue. Whether preserving cultural diversity is worth the cost in ongoing suffering. Whether there might be ways to benefit from human problem-solving capabilities without sacrificing the uniqueness of different civilizations. Thorak's massive form shifted as he contemplated the implications. What would humans do if the restrictions were lifted? Exactly what we did 300 years ago, Dr. Vasquez replied without hesitation. We would solve problems. All of them. Efficiently, comprehensively, and with minimal suffering. But the galaxy that emerged would be fundamentally different from the one that exists today. The meeting continued for hours as the students grappled with questions that had no easy answers. They learned about human philosophy, psychology, and the internal debates that continued within human society about their role in galactic affairs. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Vasquez offered one final observation: the Council banned us from warfare, but they couldn't ban us from caring. Every human in galactic service struggles daily with watching preventable problems persist. We've accepted this burden because we believe diversity of thought and culture is valuable. But that doesn't make it easy. The students departed with their understanding of the galaxy fundamentally changed. They had begun their research expecting to uncover a military secret. Instead, they had discovered a philosophical paradox that challenged everything they thought they knew about peace, progress, and the value of cultural diversity. The council chambers on Nexus Prime had witnessed thousands of deliberations over the millennia, but the emergency session called by the student research team was unlike anything in the institution's history. Representatives from over 200 civilizations filled the massive amphitheater, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic consciousness. 6 months had passed since ZYX-Era, Thorak, Kethare, and Lisa had begun their investigation into humanity's military restrictions. What had started as a simple academic project had evolved into a galaxy-changing revelation that demanded the highest levels of diplomatic attention. Professor Velthak stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing toward holographic displays that filled the vast chamber. Esteemed delegates, we gather today to consider information that challenges fundamental assumptions about galactic security, cultural preservation, and the nature of peace itself. The human delegation sat in a designated section, their modest appearance contrasting sharply with the elaborate forms of many other species. Dr. Elena Vasquez was among them, along with representatives from Earth's government and military leadership, individuals who had not participated in galactic political forums for 3 centuries. The evidence presented by these students, Professor Velthak continued, reveals that our understanding of the human military restriction has been incomplete. The question before us today is not whether humans are dangerous in warfare, but whether our current approach to preserving galactic diversity serves the greater good of all conscious beings. ZYX-Era rose from her position in the student gallery, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's ceremonial lighting. Honored delegates, our research has uncovered a truth that changes everything. Humans were not banned from warfare because they were too violent, but because they were too effective at eliminating the underlying causes of conflict. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as holographic displays showed the findings from the archived military records. Battle reports from the Kethvar system incident, psychological profiles of human military personnel, and post-conflict analyses painted a picture that contradicted 3 centuries of official history. The delegate from the Vortani Warclan stood, his armored form imposing even in the vast chamber. These revelations are disturbing, but they raise an obvious question. If humans can prevent conflicts so effectively, why have we denied ourselves this capability for 300 years? Thorak rose to address his question, the Petrosan stone features reflecting deep contemplation. Because, honored delegate, the price of that peace would be the end of our unique ways of life. Human problem-solving methods don't just resolve conflicts, they transform entire civilizations. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates processed the implications. The crystalline collective's representative pulsed with agitated light patterns, while the Aryan delegation's wings fluttered in complex emotional displays. Kethare accessed the chamber's communication systems, her serpentine form coiling around multiple interface points. Our analysis suggests that continued human involvement in conflict resolution would result in galactic cultural convergence within 2 to 3 generations. Not through conquest, but through voluntary adoption of more efficient social systems. A holographic projection filled the chamber, showing potential galactic development models. In scenarios where humans continued military involvement, the diversity of political structures, economic systems, and social organizations gradually decreased as civilizations adopted optimized human design alternatives. The question before us, Lisa added, her delicate voice carrying throughout the chamber through amplification systems, is whether preventing suffering justifies eliminating cultural diversity. The Mantarian senior delegate raised his massive form. But surely there must be ways to benefit from human capabilities without sacrificing our uniqueness. Can we not establish protocols for limited involvement? Dr. Vasquez was granted permission to address the assembly. Honored delegates, I must be honest about human psychology. We cannot observe systemic problems without feeling compelled to solve them completely. Limited involvement is not sustainable for our species, we would inevitably expand our efforts to address root causes. She activated additional displays showing internal human government analyses. Our own studies confirm that any military involvement would lead to comprehensive social intervention. It's not a choice we make consciously, it's fundamental to how humans think. The revelation prompted intense debate among the delegates. Some argued for maintaining the current restrictions to preserve galactic diversity, while others questioned whether diversity was worth the cost in ongoing suffering. The delegate from the Novak Confederation stood, her bioluminescent pattern showing deep emotional conflict. Our civilization was transformed by human intervention 300 years ago. We lost much of our traditional culture, but we gained unprecedented peace and prosperity. How do we weigh such costs and benefits? The response came from an unexpected source, the Zeralian representative, whose empire had also been solved by human intervention during the Kethvar system incident. Perhaps, the Zeralian delegate suggested, the question is not whether to maintain or lift restrictions, but whether to develop new frameworks for cooperation. Can we learn from human methods without becoming human ourselves? This proposal sparked the most intense discussions the Council had witnessed in centuries. Representatives debated potential middle ground approaches, voluntary consultation programs, limited intervention protocols, or collaborative problem-solving initiatives where human methods could be applied with explicit consent from affected civilizations. Dr. Vasquez presented humanity's perspective on these proposals. We would be willing to participate in carefully structured programs, but only with full disclosure of potential consequences. Any civilization requesting human assistance in conflict resolution must understand that the process will likely transform their society fundamentally. The crystalline collective's delegate pulsed with thoughtful patterns. Could humans perhaps train other species in these problem-solving methods? Allow us to develop our own capabilities rather than depending on human intervention? We've tried, Dr. Vasquez replied. Human methods require specific psychological and cognitive approaches that don't translate easily to other species' mental structures. Most civilizations can understand our techniques intellectually, but they can't implement them with the same effectiveness. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as delegates considered the impossibility of the situation. Human capabilities could end suffering throughout the galaxy, but using those capabilities would fundamentally transform galactic civilization. ZYX rose again, her crystalline form brightening with determination. Perhaps the solution lies not in choosing between diversity and peace, but in redefining how we understand both concepts. She activated new displays showing alternative frameworks for galactic organization. What if we established voluntary zones of human involvement? Civilizations facing existential conflicts could request comprehensive human intervention, understanding that they would emerge fundamentally transformed. Others could choose to preserve their traditional approaches, accepting the costs and ongoing suffering. A galaxy of choice, Kethare added. Where conscious beings could decide for themselves whether optimization or tradition serves their values better. The proposal generated immediate interest. Delegates began discussing implementation details, how to ensure truly informed consent, ways to prevent human intervention from spreading beyond designated zones, and protocols for civilizations that might want to reverse human design changes. Thorak addressed concerns from military-focused species. This approach would allow warrior cultures like mine to maintain our traditional structures while providing alternatives for civilizations that prioritize peace over cultural preservation. The debates continued for days. Legal frameworks were developed, psychological safeguards were proposed, and implementation timelines were discussed. Throughout the process, the human delegation provided honest assessments of their capabilities and limitations. We must emphasize, Dr. Vasquez told the assembly, that human methods are not universally superior. They are optimized for preventing conflict and minimizing suffering, but they may not preserve values that some civilizations consider more important than peace. The final proposal that emerged was revolutionary in its scope and implications. The Galactic Voluntary Intervention Protocol established 3 categories of civilization. Traditional zones maintained current restrictions on human involvement, preserving cultural diversity and accepting the costs in ongoing conflicts. Consultation zones allowed limited human involvement in specific conflicts, with extensive safeguards to prevent comprehensive social transformation. Optimization zones permitted full human intervention for civilizations choosing to prioritize peace and efficiency over traditional cultural structures. The vote was closer than anyone had predicted, passing by a margin that reflected the galaxy's deep ambivalence about the choice between peace and diversity. As the session concluded, the 4 students who had initiated this transformation gathered in the observation deck overlooking Nexus Prime's capital city. The lights of hundreds of species districts created a brilliant mosaic of galactic civilization. Do you think we did the right thing? Lisa asked, her compound eyes reflecting the city's glow. We revealed the truth, ZYXera replied. What the galaxy does with that truth is not our responsibility. Thorax stone features showed satisfaction. My people chose to remain in a traditional zone. We value our warrior culture more than optimized peace. But, now the choice was made with full knowledge of the alternatives. Kethare's analytical mind was already processing the long-term implications. The real test will come in a generation or two. We'll see whether the optimization zones develop into something better than what we have now, or whether they become sterile monocultures that sacrifice everything meaningful for the sake of efficiency. Dr. Vasquez joined them on the observation deck, having completed the complex diplomatic protocols required for human participation in council deliberations. Thank you, she said simply. For 300 years, humans have carried the burden of knowing we could end suffering but choosing not to act. Now that burden is shared by the entire galaxy. The students looked out at the city below, where beings from dozens of species moved through districts designed to accommodate their unique needs and cultures. Some of those civilizations would choose optimization, others would maintain tradition, and a few might experiment with hybrid approaches. The hardest questions don't have easy answers, ZYX-era observed. But maybe that's why they're worth asking. In the months that followed, the first civilizations began applying for consultation and optimization zone status. Each application sparked intense internal debates about values, priorities, and the nature of progress itself. The galaxy had gained something unprecedented, the explicit choice between different approaches to existence. Whether the choice would lead to greater flourishing or irreparable fragmentation remained to be seen. But, for the first time in galactic history, every conscious being would have the opportunity to decide for themselves whether peace or diversity mattered more for their civilization's future. The age of hidden human capabilities had ended. The age of conscious choice about the nature of galactic civilization had begun. And, somewhere in human space, philosophers and ethicists continued to wrestle with the question that had driven their species to accept restriction in the first place, whether the ability to solve problems carried the obligation to solve them, regardless of the cost to the rich tapestry of conscious existence that made the galaxy worth preserving.